Okay, so Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment, big book, kind of a classic, but is it actually worth the commitment, to really dive in?
Oh, absolutely worth it. Definitely. A 9 out of 10, at least. Easily.
9 out of 10. Wow, okay. I'm listening. But, what makes it so special? For someone like me going into this, what should I expect?
Well, this book, it's really for anyone who, loves to kind of get inside a character's head, someone facing a really impossible situation.
Okay.
It's dark, it's psychological, but you know what? It's surprisingly relevant, even today.
Mm.
Dostoevsky, he throws you right into 19th century St. Petersburg, poverty, desperation, where people are pushed to the edge. And that's where we meet Raskolnikov.
That's the guy. He's the one who commits the crime.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Raskolnikov, he's a poor ex-student, and he murders a pawnbroker. And Dostoevsky, he doesn't, shy away from how brutal it is. But the real story, it starts after the crime.
Okay.
We follow him as he deals with the guilt, the paranoia, all the consequences, psychologically of what he did.
So it's more like psychological thriller than a whodunit.
Yeah, it's got elements of a thriller, definitely. There's an investigator trying to find the killer. But it's bigger than that. It's about guilt, morality, that whole debate, faith versus reason.
Oh, right. I read something about that in the Iowa State Daily, that review. Raskolnikov, he tries to justify what he did with like utilitarian logic, right?
Yep.
Almost like he's doing everyone a favor.
Exactly, yeah. He thinks he's like above it all, above morality. An extraordinary man, he calls himself. And that his crime, it's, for the greater good, it'll benefit society.
Mm.
But Dostoevsky, he's brilliant. He unravels that whole logic. He shows how even good intentions, they can have really terrible consequences.
So intense read then.
Intense, yeah, definitely. But also, really insightful. Dostoevsky's writing, it's sharp, like a scalpel cutting into the human mind. He puts you right in Raskolnikov's head. You feel his thoughts, the fever, the madness, some of the descriptions. I was reading those Goodreads reviews, his nightmares, the delusions. It's really vivid stuff.
Full disclosure, I get a little hesitant with Russian novels. They have that reputation, being difficult.
Dostoevsky, he can be challenging, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. His writing, it's dense, but it's so rewarding. He chooses every word carefully, building that tension, the atmosphere. You really see into the souls of the characters.
So how does it compare to like those other Russian classics,
Yeah.
War and Peace, Anna Karenina, those kinds of books?
Those are great books, yeah. But Dostoevsky, he has a different focus. He's not so much about those epic stories, the big historical events. He's more about the inner lives of his characters, their psychological and spiritual struggles.
So it's character-driven then?
Absolutely. And the characters, they stay with you. You've got Sonya. She's forced into prostitution to help her family, but she has this incredible compassion, faith. Then Dunya, she's Raskolnikov's sister. She's strong, determined, but trapped by society, how things were for women back then.
Right.
And of course, the investigator, Porfiry Petrovich, it's like a battle of wits with him and Raskolnikov.
A lot of characters to keep track of.
There are, but Dostoevsky, he weaves them together so well. Every character matters. And you know what? Despite all the darkness, there are moments of humor. I read this scene in the Goodreads reviews where Raskolnikov, he's arguing with someone about, get this, the morality of eavesdropping. It's actually pretty funny.
Huh. Wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah.
Always a bit intimidated by those Russian names, too, to be honest. Do I need, like, a cheat sheet?
It might help at first, but honestly, you'll pick it up as you go. Don't let the names scare you away. Dostoevsky's writing is too good to miss.
Okay, I'm starting to see why you give it such a high rating.
It's a book that really stays with you. It makes you think about good and evil, our choices, and if redemption is even possible.
So for someone who's on the fence about reading it, what's the biggest takeaway?
Crime and Punishment. It's a deep dive into what it means to be human. The darkness and the light, we all have it in us.
Right, you've convinced me. Let's take a closer look at what makes Dostoevsky's writing so captivating. So you mentioned captivating. When you talk about his writing, what do you mean? Give me some examples because, in my head, I'm thinking dense, difficult.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Dostoevsky, he's brilliant at building tension, but not in the way you'd expect. It's not about, car chases or plot twists. It's all psychological. He gets you in Raskolnikov's head. You experience it all. The guilt, the paranoia, the fear, it's your own.
So it's more about, the internal stuff than what's actually happening.
Yeah, exactly. Think about that scene after the murder. I think a lot of the Goodreads reviews talked about this one. Raskolnikov's running away, right? But it's not an action scene, you know? It's Dostoevsky describing every little thing, the floorboards creaking, every heartbeat, Mr. Raskolnikov's thoughts racing. You feel that panic.
Oh, I see. So it's more like a slow burn kind of thing. That tension builds up gradually.
Exactly, yeah. And that feeling, it's throughout the whole book. You're on edge, waiting for something to happen. Will he confess? Will he break down? It's intense.
Right. But you were saying before, it's not just about, suspense. It's the characters, too. You said they were unforgettable. What makes them so interesting?
Dostoevsky, he creates these characters. They're flawed, but they feel so real. Sonya, for example. She's forced into prostitution, which is awful, right? But he doesn't make her a victim. She's got this strength, faith, compassion for others, even for Raskolnikov.
It's interesting, right, that she can have compassion for him after what he did.
Yeah, and that's what makes the relationship so fascinating. She sees something in him, the possibility of redemption maybe. She's like his moral compass almost. Challenges his views, offers him a way out through confession, atonement.
You also mentioned his sister, Dunya, right? What's her story?
Dunya, she's fiercely independent, protective of her family. She's smart, capable, but she's trapped,
Mm-hmm.
by society, what was expected of women back then, 19th century Russia.
Yeah.
And she's willing to sacrifice her own happiness to marry this guy she doesn't even like just to help her family.
Oh, that sounds rough.
Yeah, and Dostoevsky, he uses that to show how messed up things were, the hypocrisy, the social injustice, people forced into making impossible choices just to survive.
People always say Russian literature is so bleak, depressing. Is Crime and Punishment all doom and gloom?
It's a dark book, for sure. But it's not without hope. There are even moments of humor, believe it or not. I remember reading the scene, it was in the Goodreads reviews too, where Raskolnikov's arguing with this guy about whether it's okay to eavesdrop. And it's actually kind of funny in this, otherwise really tense story.
Humor, huh? Didn't expect that.
Dostoevsky, he was able to show the whole range of human experience, the dark side, but also the absurd, the resilience. It's all there.
I'm curious about the setting, actually. St. Petersburg. How important is that to the story?
St. Petersburg, it's not just a backdrop, it's almost a character itself. Dostoevsky, he describes it so vividly. The heat, the crowds, the poverty, you feel this oppressive atmosphere, and it adds to Raskolnikov's decline, almost like the city's pushing him towards madness.
So it's like the setting is kind of mirroring what's going on inside him.
Exactly. And that's not just the physical setting either. It's the social, moral landscape, the hypocrisy of the rich, the exploitation, the emptiness. Even in a big city, Dostoevsky captures it all.
So we've got this psychological tension, these characters that stay with you, the setting.
Yeah.
What else should people know before they read this book?
One thing that's really unique about Dostoevsky is his use of symbolism. He uses these recurring images, motifs, they add layers of meaning. Pay attention to the dreams, for example. They offer clues to Raskolnikov's subconscious, even foreshadow things to come.
Sounds like there's a lot going on beneath the surface.
Oh, absolutely. Dostoevsky, he was a master at layering meaning into his work. The more you look, the more you'll find.
You've given me a lot to think about. I'm less intimidated now, more intrigued. But I've got to ask, you said it can be a challenging read. I'm worried about getting bogged down with the style, the philosophy, all that.
I get it, yeah. It does require some patience. You have to pay attention, but don't let that stop you. Dostoevsky, it's complex, but it's so rewarding, like climbing a mountain, The climb's tough, but the view from the top, amazing.
I like that, yeah. So any advice for someone who's feeling a little intimidated?
Take your time. Don't rush it. Savor the language, the imagery, what he's saying about the human mind. If you get lost, reread it. It's okay. Sometimes the most rewarding parts, they're the ones that take the most effort.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a lot more confident about tackling Crime and Punishment now. Thanks for, taking me through all this.
Of course. Happy to do it. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Okay, so let's get to the final verdict then. Is Crime and Punishment a book you'd recommend to just anyone? So, given everything we've discussed, is Crime and Punishment a book you'd recommend to just anyone?
I wouldn't say anyone, no. It's definitely demanding, intellectually, emotionally, but for readers looking for something, really immersive, something that makes you think, absolutely a must read.
Okay, so who, specifically? Who would really enjoy it? What kind of reader?
Well, if you're into psychology, or philosophical questions, or, of course, if you love Russian literature, you'll find a lot to appreciate. And, if you like those character-driven stories with those tough moral choices. That's Crime and Punishment, for sure.
What if you're someone who, like, loves fast-paced plots,
Mhm.
you know, action, that kind of stuff? Would you still recommend it?
If you just want pure entertainment, maybe there are easier books out there. But if you're open to something, slower, more introspective, Crime and Punishment, it can be really gripping. That psychological tension, it keeps you hooked, even without all the explosions and car chases.
I gotta say, you've convinced me it's a classic for a reason, right? What is it about this book that makes it so timeless?
It's those themes, they're just as relevant today. Guilt, redemption, survival, the search for meaning. And Dostoevsky's writing, it's on another level. He goes so deep into the human mind, all the complexity, the contradictions. It's what makes us human.
I do have to ask, those Russian names, are they as intimidating as people say? Well, I need, like, a list next to me the whole time.
They can be a little confusing at first, yeah. But honestly, you get used to them. The story itself is so strong, you'll get past the names pretty quickly. And there's always help online if you need it. Character lists, summaries, all that.
Reading that Iowa State Daily Review, one thing that stood out to me was how Raskolnikov's crime, it's almost like a premonition of what happened in the 20th century with, totalitarianism.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think there's something to that. Raskolnikov, he thinks he's above morality, right? That he gets to decide who lives, who dies for the good of society. It's scary how much that echoes, those ideologies that led to some of the worst things in the 20th century.
So it's not just about one guy and his, descent into madness. It's also a warning about extremism, dangerous ideologies.
Exactly. A warning about what happens when people or groups put themselves above the law, when they think they have the right to control others. And that makes it, incredibly relevant today. We're seeing these kinds of ideologies pop up all over the place.
So last question then, wrap things up for us. If you had to sum up Crime and Punishment in one sentence, what would you say?
It's a journey, a haunting one, unforgettable, into the depths of the human soul. It'll challenge you, make you think, make you feel, and it'll stay with you long after you finish it.
That's a pretty powerful endorsement. I think I'm
Yeah.
finally ready to dive in. Thanks for walking me through this. I feel a lot more prepared, knowing what to expect.
My pleasure. Happy reading. And remember, if you get lost in Raskolnikov's mind, don't worry. Just keep going. It'll all come together.
Great. Thanks again. And to everyone listening, we'll be back soon with another deep dive into a different classic. So until then, happy reading.